Philippians 1, beginning in verse 3. Are you there yet? I won't have it on the screen. I just have one of the verses later that I'll show you. I thank my God in all my remembrance of you. Okay, let's pause and let me have a humble moment of self-awareness. I misquoted this in Romans. I think none of you heard it, but in a passing reference, I said, when you make your list, how many of you were here last Sunday? No, we got a lot of like every other week people that can't be here. So some of you were here. Okay. I said in Romans 16, Paul makes a list, but it's more than a list. It's a list of people that he deeply cares for and people who have cared for him, and that we all have a list, and hopefully we're on somebody's list and have this, I believe, some practical, helpful tips to make sure we are grateful for people in our lives and that we value them and cherish them, and that we be people who are worth valuing and cherishing in the lives of others. That's a quick summary. If you were here, you may have heard me say, who is on your list that whenever you think of this person, you thank God for them? I thank God in all my remembrance of you. And I realized after the sermon was over that I was quoting from Philippians, not from Romans, because Philippians is by far and away Paul's most grateful and joyous letter. And I don't think it's wrong to quote him from somewhere else, but I thought, why don't I talk more about that? Because it seemed like that sermon connected with a lot of you. And I thought, I'm just going to piggyback on last week and talk more about being grateful for people. But deeper than that, I'm going to talk about why people in our lives matter, because they're part of a process in which God is shaping us to be the people we're called to be. So that's where I want to go with this. I thank my God in all my remembrance of you. So Paul is grateful for these people in every prayer of mine, for you all, making my prayer with joy. Now verse 5. Because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. And I'm sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. That's the key verse this morning. I'll read it one more time. Verse 6. I'm sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. And it's right for me to feel this way about you all, because I hold you in my heart, for you are all partakers with me of grace, both in my imprisonment and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel. For God is my witness, how I yearn for you all with the affection of Christ Jesus. And it is my prayer that your love may abound more and more with knowledge and all discernment, so that you may approve what is excellent, and so be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God. That's a beautiful opening to a letter. So I want to talk about something less beautiful. In my living room, I have a console under the television that came, I believe, from IKEA or some similar place. And like a lot of egotistical men, I built it without the instructions and put the back on the front. So there's this like particle board thing that goes on the back side and nobody ever sees up against the wall, and it's just to hide, the openings and some little compartments and things where you put, I don't know, I almost said a VCR. I haven't had one of those in decades. But whatever you put there, in our case, a bunch of random toys that the kids don't put away properly, and they just shove them in there. So whatever you put in those compartments, behind there is some kind of little particle board covering. And I just, took the little screwdriver, and it said not to use a drill because it would tear through it. So I used a screwdriver and carefully put all the screws in. And then Kylie came and pointed out that there were already pre-drilled tiny pilot holes on the other side of the console. And I said, oh, so you mean I didn't have to jam all of these screws in here by hand? They were supposed to go on the other side. So I took it off, put it on the other side. Then, all of a sudden the tracks for the drawers made sense and went the proper way. And I didn't check that. I didn't check that first. I'm not that dumb. I'm dumb, but I'm not that dumb. So got it all put together, and now it's turned around. And if you go to my house, I may have mentioned this before, in fact, but I've certainly told some people about it. Or I should say my wife has told some people about it, and I just nod and laugh and pretend I'm not embarrassed. So the front of our TV console has tiny little holes from where screws used to be, where a piece of particle board had been screwed on there. I don't like following instructions because I think they slow me down. I don't want to be slowed down because the worst part of any job is the middle. I love the excitement of preparing to do something. I absolutely love the dopamine rush of finishing a project. How many of you like that feeling when you get done with something that you've been working on? It is a great and satisfying feeling. I don't care for the middle parts, where it's like doing the actual work. So that's not fun. It's for me, at least. It's not enjoyable. I don't like it. That's why I hate IKEA, because there's all this cool stuff, and they set it up and make it look like the finished product, and your spouse says, wouldn't this be great? And you say, yeah, it would. It would be great if they could just take this and put it in our house. But they don't. They ship it to you in tiny boxes with 1 million parts and Swedish instructions, and they say, have fun. I don't know how to say have fun in is it Swedish? Is IKEA Swedish? Yeah, okay. If it's not, then who cares? I don't think anyone from IKEA corporate is watching my YouTube videos. I think life kind of feels like an IKEA furniture piece sometimes. Like it's just this thing that the picture on the box looks great, and the imagined sort of end result is great. But then once I get into it, I think, why did I do this? Why did I do this? And I can't get out of it because I already did it. I bought it. I opened it. It's done. Like I've already put half of it together. And now I'm looking for the instructions that I didn't think I was going to need, and hoping that Kylie doesn't see me looking for the instructions that I told her I wasn't going to need. And my kid's asking, why are you throwing that, Daddy? And it's how it works. You got to throw this part for it to work properly. That's what it is. I think in life, really almost in anything important in my life, it's hard to see the finish line when I'm in the middle of the race. And so I need endurance. I need hope. There's a really much more profound example of this than IKEA furniture, and I have pictures to show you. If you're familiar with Michelangelo, let's go ahead to the next slide, please. These are 3 angles of the same statue, but there are at least 6 of these statues that are all considered slaves, or sometimes called prisoners, that were sculpted in the early 1500s by Michelangelo. 4 of them are in the Galleria dell'Accademia in Florence. And though I've not seen these in person, I've never been to Florence, I have seen pictures of them more than once. And I am a fan of art. I know that this is Gallia County, and the arts are not everyone's cup of tea in rural Appalachia, but I know some of you love art, and I know some of you will appreciate this. But even if you can't appreciate the art, you can at least understand the image. This one is called Atlas. And all 6 of these statues, and maybe more that I don't know of, are called slaves because they depict slaves, but also because the person that's depicted is still partially enslaved in the marble slab. That none of them have been completely finished. So they're unfinished. Non finito is the actual word that's used for this sort of art. It's incomplete, non finito. This is also the only one that was appropriate for me to show you in church. Most of them have lots of phallic shapes. So I picked one that I thought was most appropriate, but it also, luckily, is my favorite one because the way that he's twisted there, holding up this weight, they call this one Atlas. Michelangelo didn't name them, but scholars have named them. This one is called Atlas because it looks like he's holding this great weight above his head. Are you familiar with Atlas? The Titan from mythology who holds the world, right? Surely you've seen that or heard of that, I hope. Well, this is like a loosely based idea on Atlas, that he's holding up this great weight. And I think that Michelangelo, if you don't know, he believed that the sculptor was like God. Not that he was a god, but that the sculptor was like a tool of God that didn't create things, but simply revealed what was already inside. He had this beautiful way of describing his work, especially in making statues. That it was said of Michelangelo that he didn't form cast molds or use wax or things like other sculptors did to form things and then mark the marble and then chisel away what he imagined. Instead, he just free-handed marble slabs and sort of let things come out. One art historian said it was like something emerging up out of a pool of water when he would carve. And so he would start with the larger chisels and then work his way down to the finer details. And anyway, he said what he was doing was bringing the image out of the marble that was already inside of it, which is a really cool thought. It just sounds profound. And also, I could never dream of doing something like this. I'm for someone who likes art, I'm really not artistic. Maybe that's why I like it, because I know I'm not capable of it. But what I think is really amazing about the slaves that Michelangelo carved is that every one of them is trapped in the middle of something that looks very difficult or strenuous. This one perhaps the most. You have this weight pressing down as well as the tension of the man pressing up against it, and it's almost like all this pressure is about to explode, like something, some way is about to give. And I think life feels like that sometimes. I think it feels like I'm carrying something that I don't know how to carry anymore, and I'm pushing as hard as I know how to push, and if anything is added, what do they say? Straw that broke the camel's back, right? If just one more little pound is added to this weight, or if I lose my grip for 1 second, it's all going to implode. It's just over, right? I don't see any way out of this. Maybe you have felt something like that. That's why art is so profound, because it speaks to a human experience. It reminds us of things we have felt. The most beautiful aspect about the Non Finito art of Michelangelo is that this man is in the midst of that tension and shows no sign of coming out of it at this point, right? He's stuck there. He's trapped in the middle. The middle is messy. It's messy. And that's what I think Paul is writing about to the church in Philippi. How messy it is when you're in the middle of something. How tense, how painful it could be. Life is not a straight line. It is winding. It is confusing at times. It's a beautiful journey, but it's easy to just keep thinking, when am I going to get to the finish line? Where's the light at the end of this tunnel? And then we don't experience or enjoy the experience of the middle, the part that's so messy. And then, as we grow older, we'll look back at those messy middle moments, and oftentimes we'll reflect with a mixture of sadness and regret that we didn't appreciate what God was doing in those moments. How many of you parents of grown children wouldn't look back and think, I wish I would have cared a little more during those early days, paid more attention, cherished those moments, and locked them away a little bit tighter? Instead of complaining. I'm telling you this from the perspective of the constant complaining. I'm just always like, why are you doing this? Why are you? Quit touching each other. Quit fighting. Just say nice things. Just be kind. Just say nice things. Share what you have. You are so spoiled. I never had what you have. And you would never hear me say that to my parents. And just all of the stuff that we say. And it's just grinding away at the gears of my life and my brain. And I know that when they graduate high school, I will look back and think, I should have cherished that more. I should have enjoyed it more. But I'm not at times. I'm cherishing it, just not the way that I know I'm going to wish I did later. But I can't be the person I am later. I'm the person right now in the middle. And that's the rub, right? That's what Paul's saying. Like, I know you're in the middle right now. You don't see it the way I see it. He's in prison. He's in prison for the upteenth time. He knows his life has been full of hardship, and he can look back and see God bringing him through those messy moments in the middle. And as an older man of faith, as someone who's been through so much, he says, I know it's tough when you're in the middle, but there is an ending, and it makes the middle not only worth it, it makes it beautiful in some way, profoundly beautiful. But you don't see that yet because you're still in the dark tunnel. I'm telling you outside in the light at the end of the tunnel that you're almost here, and it's gonna be great. And you won't appreciate the light as much if you don't take time to acknowledge the darkness. You won't appreciate the order if you don't acknowledge the chaos. I don't know if this is making any sense to some of you, but I think it's probably making a lot of sense to some of you. God is in the middle just like he's at the end. And that's what I fail to realize. I almost think I'm waiting to get to God at the end of each line, each finish line, I guess. And God is saying, but I've been with you through the whole journey, and you didn't even notice. And that's where we really could have gotten to know each other. That's when you could have formed that bond, and you keep thinking, once I do this thing, then I'll be right with God, I'll be close to God, or my life will start to make more sense, or whatever it is. You pick your poison, right? But whatever it is, I think when I get there, and God says, yeah, but look at all the time you spent getting there, and you wasted all of that. We're on a journey, and it's not simple or cut and dry or clear or concise. It's a winding road, this life, and full of obstacles. And God says he's along with us for that journey, that he's in the middle parts where it's messy. In fact, the more I've studied the life of Jesus, the more I find him in the messy places, the more I see him in the middle of people's mess. It's almost like that's where God wants to be, is in the mess. He leaves heaven, which Paul will talk about in almost every letter of his. God, who left the glories of heaven and joined you in your mess. And then you think, I got to get out of this mess. But God is there with you. Maybe he's there with you for a reason. Maybe you're in the mess for a reason. Maybe the middle is not so bad. Maybe the middle is just as useful and important as the end. That's something I've had a lot of trouble believing. I just thought about that stupid TV console and how mad I would be if you threw it away. Because even though it's embarrassing, I spent a lot of time and threw a lot of parts across the room building that. And I would be annoyed if you just trashed it. But if someone had just placed that there and said, here's a TV console, I probably wouldn't care much about it. There's got to be a lot of truth, some kind of profound truth in there. I don't know what it is, but there's something in there. There's a reason I care so much about my kids that drive me nuts, and I need to see them every day and tell them goodnight every night, and I don't have to do that with your kids. I still care about your kids, but it's different. Why is it the people that drive me insane are the people I love the most? I wonder if God feels that. I only have 3 points this morning, and they're not long. The first one from Philippians 1 is that gratitude changes the game. Gratitude changes the game. Philippians 1, verses 3 through 5. He says, I thank my God in all my remembrance of you. In every prayer of mine, I'm always making prayers with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. Paul's writing from prison, and yet he's grateful. He's grateful because he knows that he depended on outside support. If you don't know, ancient Roman prisoners depended on other people supporting them. They didn't have modern reformatories with tax monies to help pay the way. They had ancient prisons, often in damp, dark, dank places, nasty places, where they would lock people up day after day and leave them there to rot, unless their family and friends showed up and gave them the things that their body needed, right? They might have minimal amounts of food or water to drink, but that was about it. They relied on others to give them fresh clothing, to bring them any kind of decent food or drinks, just simple day-to-day needs. They required family and friends support. Paul, who was seemingly unmarried and without children, at least that's what he says about himself, so then we know he has no immediate family to support him. He depends on churches. And so he's grateful that these churches, these people at church, come in and give him the things that his body needs, that they care for him, that they send him notes of encouragement or visit him while he's in prison, which is something Jesus said to do for one another. That gratitude is not superficial for Paul. When he says thank you, he's saying, you helped me survive in here. Some of us, I think myself included, superficially show gratitude to a lot of people in my life. But I wouldn't be here if it weren't for a lot of those people. I don't know if I would survive if it weren't for many of the people in my life. And I'm not even in prison. I know I wouldn't be here right now today if it weren't for so many people in my life. When I say thank you to them, it's not superficial, it's survival. You helped me get here. You helped make this possible. I hope there are people in your life that you have that sort of gratitude for. People that you recognize kept you alive, got you to where you are. Paul sees that, and it reframes the way that he looks at every situation around him. And he's encouraging us to do the same thing. If you look with gratitude at the world around you, it changes your perspective. You recognize the way God uses people, even unexpectedly. So gratitude changes the game. It transforms our perspective. Then secondly, God will complete what he starts. So Paul moves on with this sort of mental checklist. He's saying, I'm grateful. I'm not complaining. Yeah, I'm in prison, but I'm not going to complain. I'm going to be grateful for the things I do have, the people that have loved me, the things that make life worth living. And then he moves on and says, plus, I know that God is going to do something, right? If God starts a job, he will complete it. I have started things that I've not completed. I'll be honest. Some of you probably have too. It's hard for me to admit that because I'm kind of type A, and I want to know I've done everything really, really well. And that's probably why I stopped certain things I've done, because I had a sense that it wasn't going to be really good, so I just stopped, because I'd rather just not do it than to fail. God doesn't stop, but also God doesn't fail. He finishes his work, and he finishes it completely, and he does a great job. If God has started a work in you, Paul says he will complete it. Epitelese. It's a Greek word, but it means to completion or until it's done. It's really that simple. God will finish what he started. I know it sounds like such a simple thing, and yet some of you don't believe it. Some of you still live with this doubt that the thing God has been doing in your life, he may not finish it or get it finished in time. And you seem to worry about it. Am I ever going to get to where I'm supposed to be? And I think that's part of what trips us up on that journey. When I'm trying to find the finish line and God has said, I've got the finish line. I will get you there. Just keep moving. And I say, well, I don't know how to move or where to move if I don't see the finish line. And God says, I told you I'll take care of the finish line. I'll get you there. That's hard. That's why Paul reminds us, you don't have to see the light at the end of the tunnel. You don't have to know where the finish line is. Just run your race. Just keep moving. Just take another step. God will finish what he started. N.T. Wright says, God is doing what God does best. He takes the bits and pieces of our scattered lives and patiently makes a beautiful mosaic. I think that's also a lovely picture. It's kind of the opposite of the Michelangelo statues, right? Instead of bringing out of the chunk of marble what's inside, God takes the pieces that we've scattered and broken, and he puts them together and makes something more beautiful. Pick one. I don't care which artistic image you want to use. Either way, God is making something beautiful out of the life that in that moment you can't see as beautiful. Paul wants us to believe that. We need endurance. We need hope. But I'm impatient. Maybe you're impatient. I mean, you live in the year 2025. How can you not be impatient? We have everything handed to us instantly, all the time. Patience is a lost virtue. My kids are less patient than I am, and I'm already way too impatient. It's scary to live in a world like that. Trusting God means embracing the process, not just craving the finished product. I don't appreciate the process. I took a class called Food and Faith when I was in seminary, and it was so odd to take a whole seminary course on food and how it connects to theology, and yet it changed my life. I never sit and think, when I eat a meal, especially quickly in a hurry, I never sit and think about the people who had to raise all the different elements that are on that plate. Farmers and cattle workers and whoever else that raised all the stuff. Then the people who had to process it. Then the people who had to distribute it or move it from place to place, and truck drivers. And then eventually the people who had to prepare it or even stock the shelves at the grocery store. And then buy it and prepare it and cook it and then put it on a plate. There's a lot of people involved for me to just eat a meal. I don't sit and think about any of that. I just eat as fast as I can and move on about my business because I'm impatient. It said a lot to me about my life that I do everything in a hurry and I don't appreciate the process. But if I did, it would make the things I do far, far more meaningful, much more special, worth celebrating even. So then a cheeseburger becomes a momentous occasion instead of something I have to scarf down so I can go about my day. Now I want a cheeseburger. But I have to wait. So I'm learning to be patient. But I can go faster through the sermon and make myself wait a little less. Point number 3, growing in love, wisdom, and discernment. Paul wants us to keep growing. He's saying, be grateful, change your perspective. Don't look at your situation like you're stuck there, like you're in prison. He's literally in prison. He says, don't think of it that way. Look with gratitude at the opportunities that are created. Then once you recognize this is a moment of opportunity and you think, well, where am I going with that? Trust God to get you there. You may not see the light at the end of the tunnel. You may not know where the finish line is, but God will take these opportunities and use them for your good, and you've got to trust him and hold on to hope. And then finally, he says, because whatever is happening, God is growing you in love and wisdom and discernment. He's shaping you into the person you were meant to be, or perhaps the person you've always been on the inside, the imago Dei, as we say, the image of God that's born in every human being. That thing that gets marred and muddied by sin, but it's worth reclaiming. The thing that makes every person inherently beautiful, special, important. The reason we're called to love our neighbors, because they bear the image of our God. Paul sees that in people, and he says, I want you to recognize that. I want you to grow deeper in love, richer in your insights, wiser in your discernments. He uses the word agape for love, which is a favorite of Paul. Agape is different than other forms of love in Greek. We don't need to get into a word study, but the word agape just means sacrificial love or charitable love. It's giving oneself. Paul says, I want you to learn how to do that more. Paul, who's in prison, is talking about how to give more. That sounds pretty selfless. When I'm feeling like I'm trapped or I don't have what I need, I'm all about taking. Why are people not giving me what I need? And Paul says, even in that place, you should still be thinking, how can I give? How can I give? I don't think he's saying be a doormat to abusive people. He's saying find ways to love. Find ways to give of yourself. It's practical. It's community building. It's transformative. One of my favorite quotes from Richard Rohr is, we don't think ourselves into new ways of living. We live ourselves into new ways of thinking. That is so profound. I tried, and still occasionally try, to think myself into a different way of living life. But it doesn't work. If I just try to change my actions, then I find eventually my beliefs start to transform. I live myself into new ways of thinking. Think about your own understanding of life. The things that you've changed over time, aren't they rooted in your lived experience? Isn't it because of stuff you've lived out or experienced that you've changed your beliefs, not the other way around? Maturity comes not just from studying things and from theory, it comes from active love, from participating in life. We grow, think about it with any occupation that involves hands-on service. Yes, there's theory, there's training, there's sort of the study, but then there's always a practicum, like clinicals or hands-on experience or labs or apprenticeship and being a journeyman in some occupation, whatever. There's always some level of getting in there and practicing what you've been learning, because you don't actually figure it out until you start doing it. You can know a lot about it, but until you do it, you don't really get it. I wonder what difficult middle spaces are going on in your life right now. Maybe you need to reframe your perspective with gratitude. If you feel stuck, you're trapped like Atlas in the block of marble, and you think, I don't think I can hold this weight any longer. And I hope no one adds any more weight to it because I'm about to be crushed. If that's you in a moment, then start by reframing your perspective to one of gratitude, to be thankful. Maybe there is something unfinished in your life, and God is asking you to trust him to finish that work, to get you to where you need to be, to redeem that imago Dei, that image of God within you, to chip away the little bits of marble that are still there, holding you back, hiding what God has for you. This all made me think of Hamlet's soliloquy. So I'm doing a lot of art today. I'm going to Shakespeare. I didn't do that on purpose. But must have been in an artsy-fartsy kind of mood this week. You can't say artsy-fartsy at church. Just did. Funny aside, because I have ADHD and you seem to like it. My kids are not allowed to say fart. We say toot. I'm not even allowed to say fart because my wife thinks it's gross. So we say toot. I think toot is way grosser than fart. But no one cares what I think because I don't even know how to put IKEA furniture together. Does anybody remember Hamlet's soliloquy? At least one of the really famous parts. Go on, yell it out. To be or not to be, right? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler to suffer the slings and arrows of... I don't remember it, but I do remember he says at one point that we're going to shuffle off this mortal coil. And that's a phrase I've used in sermons before because it's a really beautiful rhetorical way to describe death. Shuffling off this mortal coil. It's like this coil being like troubles, right? Difficulties. So it's like saying in this life, there are all these troubles and difficulties. One day, I'll get to shuffle that off, like just move out of that into something good, something beautiful. What a cool thought. Of course, Shakespeare was a bit metaphysical and I believe trained in many ways by the church. And so I think he couldn't help himself but to see this from a Christian perspective, that God has in store for us something beyond the coil of mortal life, the troubles of life. Yeah, we're in the middle. We're being crushed under a weight. Fine. But what if that pressure is building something more beautiful for later? Can we embrace that? Do we have the patience, the endurance, the hope to embrace that process? To embrace the messy middle? Wherever you are right now in the middle place, can you be thankful to be there? I'm working on it myself. But I do believe that when I shuffle off my own mortal coil, I really do trust that God will have at that point chipped away enough of my pride and ego and insecurities and indifference and apathy and all the things that make me sinful, that he will chip away enough of that so that there's this image of Christ within that's worth reclaiming, that's worth celebrating. And I'll be able to look back and say, wow, oh, the wisdom of God. Unsearchable riches of wisdom. How did he know to do that? And why was I so impatient through the process? Would you stand with me as we close? You don't need to escape the messy middle of your life. You don't need to throw off the weight that you're carrying. That's not the goal. Don't come to Christ because you think he's going to clean up the mess and remove the weight that you're carrying. He himself said, "Take my yoke upon you," which is literally a weight that's carried by oxen. And he says, "Take this yoke upon you. I will help you carry it. I am gentle and lowly. I'm not going to be a slave driver. I'm not going to punish you. I'm going to help you carry it." But he doesn't say, "I'm going to take it away." And that would be to misunderstand the work of God. He doesn't remove the weight. He doesn't clean up the mess. He says, "I'll come sit in the mess with you. And in that place, you will grow in ways you never imagined." I wonder if you are prepared for that in your own life today.